Welcome to episode 3 of the Dawn of Rebellion podcast, brought to you from sunny Cornwall. It's just me this episode, so I'm going to introduce a section that's going to be called Ramblings. It will probably be a fairly regular part to the show. We live in quite a rural part of Cornwall, which is saying something, and it's quite tricky to get hold of people, and certainly getting a big group of people together to record a podcast. So interviews will come and go as and when we can manage them, but there will be a fair few instances where it's just me or just one of the other guys with something to say, a ramble. In my ramblings this week, I'm going to talk about an alternative outcome to the Horus Heresy. We hope you enjoy. Competition to give an alternative outcome to the Horus Heresy. Their basic idea was that you would pick a point in time of the Horus Heresy, a point of divergence, and then see how things sort of played out from there. This is a great idea. There is an amazing piece of fan work called the Dornian Heresy. If you Google it, I'm sure you'll be able to find it. Where it's Dawn that turns, and they talk about which Primarchs side with which, and how does the final battle happen, and all this kind of stuff. It's really good, really, really interesting. For my take on this, I chose Sanguinius as my point of divergence. The basic justification being is that if you look at the Triumph of Ulnor, there seems to be in the canon that there were maybe 3 choices for the position of War Master. Horus, Sanguinius and Guilliman, and for whatever reason they chose Horus. My point of divergence was that instead of Horus being chosen, it was Sanguinius. I was kind of toying with the idea of Guilliman, but he just in no way, shape or form was he ever going to be a traitor. And yes, the whole Imperium Secundus is that heresy, but intentionally turning from the Emperor is not the same thing. So my take was Sanguinius, and that was my point of divergence. How I envisaged him turning traitor was, having received the title of War Master, he confesses to the Emperor that his legion, the Blood Angels, have the curse, the flaw, or the red thirst, whatever it is. Basically, the reason why we have this flaw is the legionaries who, it's been a long time since I read Fear to Tread, but they basically sort of succumb to something primal and they lose all sense of themselves and they just become consumed with this need to drink blood. And it's a growing problem in the Legion, and they're trying very hard to keep it quiet. So Sanguinius turns to the Emperor and says, I need your help with this. And the Emperor basically says, not my problem. I've done some little quotes that I would imagine would have been exchanged, and I had the Emperor saying, you have a galaxy to conquer, my son. This is your only concern. As much as it brings you pain, this is a sacrifice you must make for the good of humanity. So the Emperor basically tells Sanguinius, kind of tough, I'm afraid. You have bigger priorities than just Legion. You've got 17 others to deal with as well. Sanguinius just being made War Master wasn't enough. So what I also had happen in the Sanguinian Heresy was that Guilliman is co-opted by the Emperor to be the political leader or the civilian leader of the Imperium. So Sanguinius is doing the conquering, and then Guilliman is doing the ruling. So he becomes the regent of terror, kind of echoing what goes on to happen in the 40k universe. And this allowed me to kind of reshape the positions and perceptions of certain Primarchs. The most notable one was Dawn. I really like the idea of Dawn turning traitor. So by having the Emperor bring Guilliman back to terror and taking that kind of primacy away from him, I felt that could be the kind of the wound that starts to fester. And so he takes the Imperial Fists and asks Sanguinius, give us some glory. We want some glory now. For too long we've sat on terror. So he takes the Phalanx and his whole legion, and they go out into the Great Crusade and cover themselves in glory over the next few years. So Sanguinius is a bit miffed that he's been given this role, but has basically been told to leave his legion to its fate. Dawn is annoyed that this upstart Guilliman has basically replaced him, and that his Ultramarines have replaced, or the Ultramarines have replaced his fist. But that doesn't account for Heresy. That's just a bit of a, that's just a daddy issue. What I had was, I had a compliance that was taking place involving the Blood Angels and the Thousand Sons. And Magnus sees firsthand the curse of the Blood Angels. In the same way that kind of Horus does in Fear to Tread. He sees one of these legionaries and is like, oh, if I can help you, I will. Whereas in that instance, Horus didn't really have any means of helping, but I've got some apothecaries, maybe they can help. Magnus knows people. Magnus has faced a similar crisis of his own with the flesh change that was running rampant through his legion. The reason they're called the Thousand Sons is he had about 1,000 of them left when he was able to save them. So Magnus sees the thirst, and in a quiet word with the War Master, he says, "Truly, brother, I have saved my sons. Let me introduce you to those who can save yours." And this is where the seeds of treachery are sown. It's not Davin, it's not through some wound that he takes and it leads him to some sort of desperate bargain, which is, I think it's a fantastic piece of writing, but for me that's Horus. Horus is weak. Abaddon says it, Horus is weak, Horus is a fool. Had Horus sort of had a bit more courage of his convictions, then despite Erebus's best efforts, he I don't think he would have fallen. So yeah, he was weak. I don't see that weakness in Sanguinius. That kind of I'm not sure how to explain this, but this idea that Sanguinius doesn't have that weakness that Horus had, that kind of lack of conviction, whereas he's not perfect. He does have his own weakness, but his weakness is his sons. He doesn't yield to chaos, and he comes back to save his sons. And I think it's that love that he has for his legion, for the Blood Angels, that will become his betrayal. He refuses to let them die, and he goes to whatever means necessary to do that. Sanguinius is given this idea that there are beings out there who can offer him salvation, that can save the Blood Angels, and he just needs to go and find them. What I thought would be good here was to take some of the events that happened in the Horus Heresy and just spin them a little bit. So the key idea, or the key event that I wanted to hinge the Sanguinian Heresy on, was Molech, which is the battle covered in the book Vengeful Spirit, which is superb. If you haven't read it, read it, it's amazing. So what I had was Magnus and Sanguinius arrive at Molech in search of the secret that was locked away by the Emperor. There's already Blood Angels on Molech. It wouldn't have been particularly hard for Magnus to have found out what was going on, sense the warp taint on this planet. I didn't think that was too unreasonable. Magnus leads Sanguinius to the cave where the Emperor entered the realm of chaos, and how I understand it is he goes through this gateway, he makes his pacts, he makes his deals with the gods of chaos for the knowledge that he needs to kind of... It's not really made clear, or my understanding of it isn't clear, but I get the feeling that he bargains with chaos either for time or for knowledge to create the legions and create the Primarchs, and then it all goes a bit sour when he reneges on his bargain. That's all to be kind of played out. So Sanguinius enters the realm of chaos and is shown these various visions of the future that the Emperor seeks to bring about. And the visions are kind of flashes of 40k and of misconstrued or misinterpreted things that as the omnipotent reader, oh, that means that. So, for instance, he sees a future of countless trillions bowing before effigies of an uncaring emperor, lives of misery, violence, and ceaseless toil. 40k. A future where the Primarchs are ruined husks, they and their legions bled dry by the constant demands of an ungrateful Imperium. I think that's not too unreasonable to assume. The Primarchs are still, at some very base level, human, or they would have got tired of this, especially if it was constant, if it was incessant. Dante speaks about being weary, and he's only been there 1,000 years. The Primarchs, who are, more functionally immortal than the rest of the legions, that's going to get old. It's going to get tiresome. It would be soul destroying to lose so many of your sons, so many of your children. I mean, Nighthaughter probably wouldn't have given a shit, neither would Angron, but the rest of them, it would have ground them down, and one by one they would have been finished off. And the final vision, which is the one that they really pushes Sanguinius to making his decision, is he sees a vision of wolves tearing off the wings of angels, implying that the Emperor will unleash the Space Wolves on the Blood Angels, and he sees his legion being erased from history in the same way that the Primarchs of the 2nd and 11th legions were. His love for his legion overpowers everything else, and it's that love that makes him turn, and he will do whatever he can to stop the Blood Angels from being made extinct. I've mentioned it in previous episodes, but I'd just like to give another shout out to the Alchemist Workshops and Element Games, two fantastic independent retailers who provide excellent discounts. They're not giving us anything for this. They have helped the club out with charity events in the past, so we definitely felt it was worth giving them a bit of promotion. Here's how I saw loyalties being divided. I reckon the Dark Angels, the Lion has problems of his own. Sanguinius would offer him a solution to the taint of Caliban in return for his fealty. The Lion accepts this, but his kind of martial honour nonsense that he has going on means that this is only temporary, and that when Sanguinius has won, he be left to forge his own path at the end of the war. So he doesn't want to be ruled over by Sanguinius. He's not trading one emperor for another. He says, right, I'll help you, but then we're done. The Emperor's children... in this instance, I didn't see Fulgrim joining Sanguinius. Loyalty is a virtue, and if he's trying to be perfect in all things, then he must be perfectly virtuous, and I see that being perfectly loyal. I think Ferrus, I'm working through them in order, but I'll come back to it. Ferrus is intricately tied in with Fulgrim. They have this really close bond, and I see Ferrus remaining loyal. I don't see him joining Sanguinius, and so I think that kind of the loyalty of Ferrus Manus would sway Fulgrim in this particular instance. So his drive for perfection would mean that he would kind of always see Sanguinius, who is, let's be honest, he's a mutant. There's him and Magnus with his eye, and Sanguinius with his wings. Those are not, they don't fit with this idea of the perfect sort of body and specimen. So I think Fulgrim probably always has a bit of a chip on his shoulder about Sanguinius, and probably resented Sanguinius being elevated to the title of War Master. With the Iron Warriors, I reckon with Dawn refusing to answer summons and basically pledging to Sanguinius right from the off, Perturabo would be called in. And being the greatest siege master in the galaxy, he would then accept the task of defending Terra. He says, I know how to tear down a fortress. By definition, I can work out how to build one that's impregnable. And if Dawn's gone on the other side, I think Perturabo is always going to be the opposite of that. So if Dawn has gone traitor, Perturabo goes loyal. The White Scars, the Khan tells Horus, "You call, I answer," and the Great Khan keeps his oath. I'm going to leave it there because I want to talk about where I think Horus goes in this. Space Wolves, Russ knows his place, and he knows his purpose. He knows what he is. He's an executioner, and he is the Emperor's loyal hound, whatever you want to call it. And I reckon he would, like Guilliman, there is no way Russ is going traitor. I could see him going, but I can't see him going traitor. So Space Wolves are going to stay loyal. Imperial Fists, as we said, the seeds of Dawn's resentment were sown, not with the elevation of Sanguinius to War Master, but with his replacement by Guilliman as Regent of Terror. Dawn had sat by and watched the others conquer the galaxy and earn glory, and he wanted his chance to stamp his kind of name on history, and a chance that the War Master is all too happy to grant him. In the Horus Heresy, all the legions get involved, but I have a slight different take on that. The Night Lords Kurz is haunted by these nightmares that he has, this kind of foreknowledge that he has. He knows bad stuff's happening. He knows how he's going to die, and I reckon that he would be driven by kind of nightmarish visions of this, this war to come, and Kurz would take his legion into the maelstrom. I think his visions would take him there, and basically remove him from the heresy, or at least until the very end of the heresy. The Blood Angels, they're going with Sanguinius. There's no question about that. I don't see there being a need for a purge in the legions. Like, there doesn't need to be an Istvan 3 for these legions. I think the Blood Angels are, Terran or otherwise, are going to be so enamoured by Sanguinius, and because they know that they too could have the flaw, and they too could have the thirst because it's in their gene seed, and they've all got that, whether they're Terran or from Baal or whatever. I think they would have a vested interest to be with Sanguinius and see it through to the end. I've mentioned the Iron Hands. Ferrus Manus admires Sanguinius, and I see him being initially quite torn between the two sides, especially were Sanguinius to sort of appeal to him in person. But ultimately, I think with Fulgrim leaning towards the Emperor, I think the two of them would convince each other to stay loyal. And so he would go to the walls of the Emperor's palace and kind of fill the role that the Blood Angels do in the actual Horus Heresy. They're on the walls. They are the last line. The World Eaters, none are going to be surprised that Angron turned on his father, as with the Horus Heresy. He's quite a... I like Angron as a character. He appears very one-dimensional. I'm angry, I will kill all the things. But there is more to him than that. But I think, however, those are all ancillary bits. The ultimate drive that he has is the resentment that he didn't get to die on Nuceria with his fellow slaves, that the Emperor saved him and denied him that death. So yeah, he's definitely well up for some heresy and to take it to the Emperor. The Ultramarines, Rabute is the Avenging Son and Lord Regent of Terror. He's the Emperor's will made flesh. He's going to stay loyal till the end of time. I don't see that happening any other way. The Death Guard, I see Mortarion saying, no, I'm not getting involved in this. He refuses to accept the divinity of the Emperor. He doesn't accept that he's a god. Not that the Emperor's claiming that, but everybody kind of knows that he is. But equally, he abhors the open use of psychers and the freakish mutations of Sanguinius. Magnus is the real kind of instigator of the Sanguinian heresy. He's the architect, through good intentions, I think, but ultimately it is his fault. Sanguinius supported the Librarius and its implementation, and I think Mortarion is going to see, chief psyker, chief supporter of psyker and mutant, and go, no, those are the things he hates. Those are what he rejects. So I see the Death Guard going, yeah, but also screw the Emperor. I'm not involved. So I have him returning to Barbarus and basically carving out his own empire in Segmentum Tempestum, saying, this is us, keep out. Thousand Sons, as I said, I see Magnus as being the kind of great architect of the Sanguinian heresy, and although his motivations were pure, his actions were misguided, and the great and powerful Magnus is basically played like a fiddle by the Pantheon of Chaos. His hubris is what kills him. Magnus did nothing wrong. Yeah, he did. He had hubris. He thought he was better than he was, and whilst he was trying to do good, intentionalism versus consequentialism, you have to deal with the consequences. It doesn't really matter how good your intentions were. If it still goes to pieces, you have to pick up those pieces. That the pieces are all that's left, and it's Magnus's fault that the Sanguinian heresy takes place. The Lunar Wolves, I've called them that. They're not the Sons of Horus. They're called the Sons of Horus when Horus becomes War Master. I thought about changing the Blood Angels to the Sons of Sanguinius, but I don't know. I don't think Sanguinius would have done that. I don't think he would have wanted to change the identity of his legion. So I've kept the Lunar Wolves as the Lunar Wolves. Horus's love for his brother outweighed that of his father. And when he saw Sanguinius in need, he came to his brother's aid without a second thought. Had he refused, I think the heresy would have ended. Word bearers. Lorgar only ever really wanted the truth. That's made clear by his character and his actions pre-heresy. All he wants is the truth. The Emperor says he's not a god. He doesn't believe him, and I think when the truth is revealed to him, he would have been one of the early converts. I think, a half an hour conversation with Magnus, and he'd go, look, gods, here they are. I think Lorgar would have embraced that quite quickly. And with Lorgar, his legion would have as well. We see in books like The First Heretic how willing his legion are to go alongside him and to be part of this treachery. Salamanders, the Promethean Creed teaches absolute loyalty to the Emperor, and I can't see Vulcan swaying at all. I just can't see it. For a lot of the other Primarchs, you can kind of see a chink in the armour, a gap, but for Vulcan, I just don't see it. Unless the Raven Guard, I didn't really know what to do with the Raven Guard. They're an enigmatic bunch. I actually play them in 30k. I've got a good size. Them and the Ultramarines. I've got a good size Raven Guard force. But Corax as a character is quite difficult to wrap your head around, I think. So I had Corax kind of filling the role that the Blood Angels did, being sent far away to the Galactic East. And when news of the heresy reached him, he would have seen perhaps a bit of a reflection of his own journey in Sanguinius. And he would have seen, here is a man who loves his family, and he's trying to free them from the sort of the yoke of tyranny, even if that tyrant is his father, the Emperor. But at the same time, I think Corax's loyalty to the Emperor, who delivered him and Deliverance, the moon, I think Corax is staying loyal. So what I had was him basically charging back and using sort of the tactics they're known for, this sort of strike and fade, to basically just harass the backline of the angelic host, the traitors. And I think that would have had a crippling effect on the logistics and the supply of the angelic host. So yeah, I had Corax being a bit more of a prominent figure. He gets wiped out and is not insignificant, but he's not prominent in the heresy, the Horus heresy, but I see him having a bit of a bigger role in the Sanguinian heresy. And that lastly leaves us with the Alpha Legion. Ever mysterious. I think the Alpha Legion and their enigmatic Primarchs would take it upon themselves to kind of spread discord amongst the traitor ranks. But at the same time, I can't see them accepting orders from Guilliman, especially if the Emperor goes sort of in absentia. Guilliman openly hates, his disdain for the Alpha Legion is well known, and I can't see Alpharius and Omegan turning around and going, yes, Rabute, whatever you say. And yeah, so I see the Alpha Legion kind of doing their own thing for the Loyalists, but not necessarily being part of the coherent battle plan, and certainly not to be relied upon by Rabute and the others. Very quickly coming back to the White Scars, Horus goes with Sanguinius. I see the Khan doing that as well. The Emperor has retreated to his palace. He has become the centre, and in the book Scars, the idea that the Great Khan there will always be tyrants that need to be slain. And the Emperor has become this tyrant. He's become the very thing that the Khan has been hunting all his life, and this is just another tyrant that needs to be overthrown. So the breakdown of the legions we have on the Loyalist side, I see the two prominent ones being the Ultramarines and the Space Wolves, and then we've got the Emperor's Children, Salamanders, Iron Hands, Iron Warriors, Raven Guard, and Alpha Legion. And then the traitors, or the angelic host, we have Blood Angels and Thousand Suns being the prominent ones, and then Dark Angels, White Scars, Lunar Wolves, Imperial Fists, World Eaters, and Word Bearers, with the Night Lords disappearing into the Eye of Terror for reasons unknown, and Mortarion going, yeah, I'm not interested. So that's my split, and that's how I saw it playing out. So the kind of main events of the Sanguinian heresy, we have Russ unleashes his legion on Sanguinius and Magnus at Molech. He finds out that's where they're going, and he's too late to stop them uncovering the secrets of the Emperor's power. And Russ is slain by Sanguinius Ascended. So Sanguinius makes his deals, comes out, gets that kind of extra power that Horus gets when he comes out of Molech, and Russ just can't deal with that, and the Space Wolves are annihilated on Molech. The Lion and the Khan basically go out hunting together and are crippling fleets returning to Terra, decimating forces of the Salamanders and the Emperor's children with their superior speed and voidcraft. I see that being really a sore point, especially for Fulgrim. He thinks his legion is perfect in all ways, and I can see the Dark Angels and the White Scars absolutely running rings around them in a void battle. Horus and Lorgar would persuade Mars to rebel against the yoke of the Emperor, exposing him as the fraud that he is, before becoming embroiled in the Martian Civil War. I see that happening quite easily. The promise of opening the vaults and all that kind of stuff, much as we have in the book Mechanicum. Again, another amazing book, definitely read that one. Korax assassinates Angron. I was quite pleased with this idea, in a stunning example of marksmanship, shooting the rampaging Primarch through the eye as he deploys from his Dark Star Storm Eagle. So I see sort of falling backwards out of this, picking up his heavy bolter, and one round straight through Angron's eye, through the brain into the nails, and bang. Primarchs can die. Heavy bolter round to the eyeball is going to do it. And I think Korax, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Korax. Alfarius attempts to convince Mortarion of the justness of their cause, but is rebuffed. And in an ironic twist, the Alpha Legion are going to virus bomb Barbarous, but not before the Death Guard Primarchs escapes, more or less undetected. So the Death Guard are poisoned to death in a viral virus bombing, which I thought had a bit of a kind of poetic license or poetic twist to it. Vulcan confronts the Great Khan, and though he loses the fight, his immortality kicks in and he returns to hold the gates of Terra, slaying hundreds of enemy champions, including Sigismund. Now in the lore, it's Sigismund who holds the gate. I don't know which gate it is, but it's one of the last gates into the palace, and he's there for however long it is, just hacking down champion after champion. Now Sigismund's just a legionary. If Vulcan was there doing that, that would be who's stopping Vulcan? No one. No one's stopping Vulcan, apart from the Khan, of course. So Ferrus Manus leads his Medusan immortals to Mars to unlock the Archaeotech vaults. I think he's the logical choice to go to Mars. The Iron Hands, cybernetics, bionics, all that kind of stuff. I think Ferrus would be up for that task. While he's there, I could see him getting involved in a direct conflict with Lorgar and Horus. I see Ferrus crippling Lorgar pretty easily, leaving him paralysed from the waist down. But Horus exacts his revenge by killing Ferrus. I think on a 2-on-1, I think Ferrus will put down Lorgar, but then Horus will put down Ferrus. So Ferrus is gone, and all the immortals are gone. And soon afterwards, I think the death of Ferrus is the apotheosis, it's the catalyst for Fulgrim's conversion in the Horus Heresy, and I think his death carries no less significance. And I see, I know there's a sort of the brotherhood betrayal thing between Fulgrim and Ferrus, but still, as a sacrifice, I think Horus killing Ferrus would mark his ascension to demonhood, and I think Horus would become the first demon Primarch. The Phalanx leads the Siege of Terra, and I see, Dawn has a very deep understanding of the Imperial Palace and the defences of Terra. He built most of them. Perturabo hasn't had that long to reinforce them. And I think Dawn at this point is not mucking about, and I reckon the Phalanx, being this massive star fortress, is going to just wade in and shoot down the orbital plates. So I've had him shooting down 2 of the orbital plates and flattening huge swathes of the palace. Almost half the defenders are going to be killed by this impact, including Perturabo, who wrong place, wrong time. The final battle, I don't see it being the attritional bloodbath that the lore says the Horus Heresy was, for the simple reason is that Magnus knows the back door. He knows, how there's another way into the palace. And I reckon Magnus would lead War Master Sanguinius, the Thousand Sons of the Blood Angels, and the Great Khan, and the White Scars into the Eldar Webway. Using the arcane knowledge stolen and bartered for, he would wind his way through to the very throne room of the Emperor, and whilst the Loyalists are so busy watching the skies and orbital plates raining down on them, the true threat is coming in through the webway. Magnus engages the Emperor and psychically duels with him after making short work of Malcador. The Emperor is and so Magnus goes after the Emperor in a psychic battle, whilst the Great Khan takes on Valdor, the leader of the Custodes. Sanguinius dispatches Fulgrim with this sort of sublime display of swordsmanship that leaves the Primarch of the Emperor's Children both awed and outraged by his defeat. If you've read Angel Exterminatus, when a certain Emperor's Children is finally defeated by a certain Raven Guard, there is a really brilliant sort of couple of sentences where he's frustrated beyond belief that he's been killed or he's about to be killed, but at the same time he's in awe of the swordsmanship. And I see Fulgrim having a similar kind of reaction to his defeat by Sanguinius. Magnus is psychically dueling the Emperor, but he's not going to win that fight. He knows that, but he does enough to wear the Emperor down. And in the physical battle that takes place next, with Sanguinius ascended, he loses that fight and the Emperor is killed. But the psychic backlash from this death purges chaos from Sanguinius' soul. In Mechanicum, when the Astronomicon passes through the Magma City, all the scrap code kind of gets burned out, and I see a kind of similar thing here. The Emperor, psychic explodes, bedazzling light, all that kind of stuff, and it washes through Sanguinius and purges all of chaos from him. And Sanguinius wakes up, if you want. He comes back and he sees what he's done, and he's so ashamed and repentant that he falls on his own sword. He takes his own life. He says, I deserve to die for this. At the moment of his death, at the moment that Sanguinius takes his own life and dies, the entire Blood Angels Legion succumbs to the thirst. He has his own psychic backlash, and it washes over the Legion. And they all go berserk, and they go into this massive killing frenzy. They burst out of the palace, and it takes about an eye-watering number of human and Astartes lives to stop them. And in the end, every single Blood Angel is killed. They were all committed to the attack on the siege on Terra, and they were all eventually put down by the Loyalists. So that final vision that Sanguinius had of his legion being erased from history actually comes true. It's the only one that does. Demon Primarch Horus fights his way through to Sanguinius, and gathers his body and sword and vows to avenge his fallen brother. He doesn't know the ins and outs of this. Nobody saw what Sanguinius did. So as far as Horus is concerned, the Emperor killed Sanguinius, or they killed each other. So he's going to take up his brother's sword. As Magnus is retreating back through the webway, Conrad Kurz and his Night Lords arrive, and they ambush and capture the Primarch Magnus. The visions, Kurz goes into the Eye of Terror to find an entrance to the webway that will lead him to where he can do the most good for the galaxy. It's not about loyalty to the Emperor, it's about good for the galaxy. I think Kurz is on about justice, and betrayal requires justice, and this is how he kind of, in the Sanguinian Heresy, his logic is working. So he captures Magnus and drags him back to Terra. Guilliman is the de facto Emperor now, and he shackles Magnus to the Golden Throne, forcing him to keep the Astronomicon lit, while he chases the rest of the Renegade Astartes back into the Maelstrom. I didn't really know... Well, I toyed with the idea of him just killing Magnus, but I think Guilliman would be pragmatic. That's why he would be chosen to be Regent of Terra. And he would go, well, the Emperor's light kept the Imperium running. We need to keep that beacon lit. Magnus is going to have to do it. So rather than the Emperor kind of voluntarily placing himself on the throne, I think Magnus is being forced to do it would be the ultimate kind of punishment for the guy who orchestrated this whole betrayal, however well intentioned. He deserves this. This is his punishment, and I think it's a suitable punishment. And so the final part of the Sanguinian Heresy is that in the mountains of the Himalayas, a child is discovered in a cave once dedicated to reverence of the Emperor, a child with golden eyes and a numinous bearing. A lot of you might not, I don't know, it depends how deeply you've delved into the black library of the internet. There is a chain of thought in the lore that the Emperor is an amalgamation of the most powerful psykers in the world who did this kind of ritual suicide thing, and their souls sort of fused together to create a greater entity that we know as the Emperor is. I think it's sometimes called the Star Child. Anyway, there is a thinking that upon the Emperor's death, he will be reborn back as basically the Emperor again, in a kind of second coming. So yeah, I like the idea that at the end of the Heresy, the Emperor is gone, but this reincarnation, this cycle keeps going, and so we have a new Emperor. And I left it there. Does he become apparent very quickly, or is this another 10,000 years before he makes his presence known again? In the build up to 8th, there was lots of sort of internet chatter about, well, if Cypher makes it to Terra and he were to kill the Emperor out of loyalty, knowing that with the knowledge he'd gained in his wanderings and his travels and the secrets of the Dark Angels and knowing that if the Emperor were to die, he would be reborn, no longer sort of confined to this withered husk. He'd be back full flesh and blood, or however divine you want to make him. So yeah, I think that would have been a really cool story arc, and it might still happen. The Emperor can't be this withered thing forever. I think something needs to happen with that. So I wanted that to be a kind of an option at the end of the Sanguinian Heresy. So those are my thoughts on that. We're recording on the 1st of August. I don't know how my pitch went to the Age of Darkness podcast. They had some excellent entries last year, so probably not very well, but that was my take. Let me know what you think, and it would be great to hear from you. That's it for episode 3 of the Dawn of Rebellion podcast. Thank you for listening. Please join us on social media. We've got a Facebook group and a Twitter account running now. Just search Dawn of Rebellion podcast and @Dawn of Rebellion. If you'd like to be on the show, please get in touch. It'd be great to speak to you. We're always interested to hear what people in the community have to say, new projects, what you're working on, or just tell us about how you got started. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.